Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Morning Of by S. B. Cody, narrated by Stephen Graybill. Part 1. Lockdown 1. It could never actually happen here. Everyone in town held this general belief. Of course, they would never say so out loud. Most weren't even aware that they held it. Common sense dictated that, of course, it could happen here. What was stopping it? You heard stories all the time about it happening in places just like this. So while basic logic insisted that it was entirely possible, everyone went about their day-to-day lives, confident that they were safe from what had become an all-too-common occurrence. We shouldn't judge too harshly for their naivete, though. Doesn't everyone share this belief, that they are somehow immune from the worst that life has to offer? Other people had to deal with the debilitating illness, the awful crimes that made the front page. If we actually believed we were susceptible to the awfulness of the world, would we ever actually head outside our doors? Would we ever walk down a dark street if we believed a heinous killer laid in wait for us? Would we ever get on a plane if we believed that it would end in a fiery mess of twisted steel? Would those 1,067 people have walked into Stanford West High School if they believed that 28 of them were never going to leave alive? The town of Stanford sat in the center of Missouri, with a nice, manageable population of about 120,000. It avoided the small-town atmosphere, so you were never under any obligation to say hello to every person who crossed your path. At the same time, it wasn't so large that you had to take 3 different buses and a subway just to get to where you were going. What constituted downtown was really just about 10 blocks, all situated around one street, appropriately titled Main. If someone wanted to walk it, they could do it no problem, and with no real fear of getting mugged. Of course, that's not to say that there weren't some bad parts of town. The southern and eastern parts were where you'd find some of the more low-income areas. West Stanford High, however, had the good fortune of being situated in the middle-class part of town, making it the more desirable of the 2 high schools in the district. The school was situated at the bottom of a small hill that would be filled with cars every morning at arrival time. The red brick facade of the school stood tall against the sky. A line of glass doors stood at the end of a concrete patio. 3 doors led into the lobby, where a security desk sat front and center. At this desk, Zach Levinson lounged, watching the seconds tick by. He fought to keep his eyes open, willing the school day to come to an end. But it was only 8:30, and the kids were just now settling down for their second period. All day, he buzzed in person after person, hardly stimulating work. But it was only something to hold him over until he got accepted to film school. One day, the theaters would flock with people to see the new blockbuster from the next Spielberg. At least, that was his plan, but the best-laid plans of mice and men. Zach forced his eyes open just in enough time to see someone walking towards the front doors. Normally, he would think nothing of it, but this person was dressed all in black, standing out sharply from the bright sun pouring in. He had on black cargo pants, a worn-out black hoodie, a book bag strapped to his back, and, most concerning of all, a Michael Myers mask covering his face. Zach didn't need to force his eyes open any longer. They shot open in shock. Given a bit more time, he may have been able to sort the whole situation out, but after just a few steps inside, Michael Myers drew something shiny and metallic from one of his pockets. Zach only had time to get a brief glance at it before it became level with him and screamed out a bullet which hit Zach square in the forehead, sending him sliding back in his chair and to the ground. Blood spat from the back of his head. Michael then quickened his pace. He hurried to the desk, reached over, and pressed a small button. To his right, the front office door clicked and unlocked. Not wasting any time, he hustled inside. At the main desk, a group of women, most of them older and graying, stood to await the school's new guest. Michael raised his gun again and fired off 2 more shots, not really aiming. Still, he managed to nail the attendance secretary, Dolores Lewiston, in the side, which sent her tumbling and all others ducking down. Michael now turned to the right so he could head behind the desks. Just as he did so, Sergeant Blake, the school resource officer, rushed out, his hand on his own gun. He got it about halfway up before Michael fired off 1 more round, landing a shot in Blake's eye. Blake hadn't even hit the ground before Michael pounced and began going through his belt. From it, he withdrew a set of keys, including one allowing access to any room. He grabbed the gun, stood, and rushed out of the office. Behind the desk, one of the secretaries had pulled herself out of shock and gone to the intercom. Pressing the button to broadcast to the entire building, she screamed out, "Lockdown! Lockdown! We have an active shooter! This is not a drill! Shooter is in the main hallway!" That message rang out in every corner of the school. Michael Myers ran down towards the library, which lay at the end of the hall. At the doors, the librarian struggled to get the doors closed and locked, but the doors were heavy, and Michael rang out another shot that sent her sprawling onto the blue carpet. A stream of blood pooled beneath her gut. Michael burst inside. The students ducked beneath tables and behind shelves, desperate to do anything to shield themselves. Michael, quick around the shelves, staked out anyone who thought they'd hid in time. One girl huddled in a corner, her hands held high in defense. "Please, please, please," she cried out. Michael didn't spare her a glance. He simply sped by her while lowering his gun, and fired, sending a bullet into her head. He ran over to a table where a boy and girl crouched underneath, arms clutched to the legs as though they thought they'd be carried away. Michael stopped by the table, reached under with his gun, and shot off 2 more rounds. The boy caught one right at the bridge of his nose. A hole opened up in the girl's shoulder. A few more students and another librarian laid in wait. Michael just ignored them and headed back into the hall, knowing he had to keep moving. He sprinted, his footsteps pounding against the tile and echoing off the walls. One student dashed across at that moment, desperate to duck inside a bathroom. Michael fired off a couple rounds, hitting the student in the leg, sending him crumpling to the ground. Right as Michael walked by the bathroom, the door creaked open a sliver, and 1 more shot was fired into the door, but he didn't bother to check to see if anyone had been hit. There were a lot of rooms to peek into. As he continued, he stashed away his gun into his book bag and withdrew another. And so down the hall he went, rocking the handles of each door that he passed, seeing if any prey laid in wait. Back before the first shot had been fired, and Michael Myers was still heading towards the school, someone else stood in a bathroom on the bottom floor. They went right to the trash can to find a bag just where they were told it would be. This new figure found an Uzi, another dark hoodie, a pair of cargo pants, and a hockey mask. With all of that on, the 2 figures were indistinguishable, except that this new one now resembled Jason Voorhees. Decked out, Jason took the gun and stood by the door. Quick, muffled breaths came from behind the mask. Beneath it, Jason poured sweat. He just couldn't believe that this was happening. Before, it had all seemed hypothetical, but now it was all too real. And then there it was, the call for a lockdown, just what he had been waiting for. He knew what he was supposed to do, but now found that his feet wouldn't move, couldn't move. Upstairs, Michael Myers unlocked a classroom door where over a dozen people waited. He yanked on the handle only for it to come to a halt after only opening a crack. Tied to the inside handle was a cord that snaked up and wrapped around a flagpole. From inside came a sea of gasps and whimpers for help. Michael reached inside and fumbled for the knot around the handle. Someone pounded against his hand, trying to get Michael to back off. He couldn't get a good enough grip on the cord to untie it. He retreated only to stick his hand back in with the gun this time. He fired off a few blind shots. A couple hit the back wall. A shrill cry made it clear that at least one made contact with someone. Michael immediately went back to the cord and got it untied in no time. The door swung open wide now. A small cabinet sat in the doorway, but a quick kick got rid of that. Michael stepped inside. Right beside the door, the teacher lay on the ground, clutching his gut, where the bullet had landed. Michael fired a single shot down, hitting the teacher in the head. Students huddled against the wall closest to the door. A few took off running, managing to squeeze by and escaped into the hall. Others stood and shuffled their feet, not sure what to do or where to go. Most of them just sat on the floor looking at the figure above them, mouths open, tremors traveling throughout their bodies. This situation had been practiced, and in their heads they all had an idea of what to do. They could run like a few had. They could rush the shooter, throwing things at him, wrestling the gun away. So many of them imagined themselves doing just that, charging forth into danger and saving the day, being the hero of the school. That didn't happen, though. Instead, they froze. A few cried out, realizing that this was it. All the plans for their life wouldn't come to pass as Michael raised the gun and began popping off shots, firing into the huddled crowd. 2 hours before Michael and Jason would lay siege to the school, Connor Sullivan pulled his car into a spot right up front, the perfect place to park. Front entrance was within spitting distance, and a back road out of campus wasn't much further. Made getting out of here at the end of the day really easy, and as he prepared for the day, getting out of here was the only thing on his mind. It was only October, but Connor had already begun counting down the days until summer. He looked up at the building, feeling like there might as well be bars on the windows. Connor looked down at his watch. There was still an hour until the day officially began. He typically didn't get to school this early, but he had been desperate to get out of the house without a fight with his wife, Brandy. He began to relive the whole thing, feeling the simmering tension of the morning heating up once again. He pushed it away and forced himself out of the car. As soon as he was inside, he headed right to the teacher's lounge where he knew there had to be a fresh pot of coffee waiting for him. Once he opened the door to the lounge, the scent wafted right up into his nostrils, and he made a beeline for the pot that still had steam rising up from it. Off to the side sat one of Connor's fellow English teachers, Lance Milton, sipping his own cup. He had a pair of glasses with huge lenses. Students constantly debated whether he wore them ironically or not. His gut had just begun to spill over his belt, which he seemed to own with pride. "Sally, what's happening, man?" Lance called out. Connor offered a groan, just barely audible, in reply. "Well, aren't you in a good mood this morning? Seems like you, if you even say, that I have a case of the Mondays I will kick your ass," Connor muttered, taking a seat across from Lance. That had often been a favorite saying of Lance's that had soon worn out what little welcome it had. "Damn, something crawled up deep in there, didn't it?" "Having a bad morning," Connor said, wincing through the hot, bitter taste of the coffee. "God damn," he spat out. "Put sugar in there, damn it. I will never understand how you drink this black." "I drink it for the caffeine, not the taste. You should advertise for Starbucks. So, who died that put you in the funk? Haven't even seen a student yet." "Brandy and I almost got into a fight this morning." "Almost? How will your marriage ever survive?" Lance shouted in a high-pitched voice and threw his hand over his chest. "Shut up. I say almost because I got my ass out of there before it could get going. Avoidance, the key to any healthy relationship," he said with a smile and a tilt of his cup. "So, what'd you do?" "Who says it was me?" "Come on." Connor sighed, wondering how he got roped into actually having this conversation. He had been hoping for some peace and quiet. She found out that a friend of hers from college just got pregnant. "And how does that make you feel?" Lance asked in his best impression of a shrink. "Will you knock it off with that shit?" Connor knew that Lance's insistence on always being a smartass endeared him to his students, but it wasn't working on him. "Sorry," Lance said, hiding his eyes, realizing that he'd taken his shtick a bit too far. "It's just that lately she's been dropping some none-too-subtle hints that she wants to have one." "How long have you been together?" 12 years, married for 5. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "Why would I want to have kids, all the bitching and moaning and complaining that we have to deal with here every day? I'm going to go home and deal with it all over again?" "Is that mug half full there, Sully?" "Helpful." "What are you still doing here?" "You think I don't ask myself that? You need to shit or get off the pot. They should put that in a fortune cookie. I think I missed my true calling." Right as he finished talking, the door swung open again, and in walked someone who could easily have been mistaken for an FBI agent. He wore a firmly pressed black suit and blonde hair cut into a flat top that wouldn't even shake in an earthquake. This was Dr. Leland, the associate principal. He didn't even spare Connor or Lance a look. In fact, his face didn't so much as quiver. He went over to the coffee pot and poured himself a small cup. "Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Milton," he whispered in a way of a greeting. "Dr. Leland," Lance blurted out in a voice that came off much more mocking than he intended. Connor shot him a quick look as a way to tell him to shut up. Lance's eyes went wide, realizing that he might have crossed a line. But if Leland noticed, he didn't let on. He simply turned on his heels and headed back out. "Do you think he realizes that he's a douche?" Lance asked the moment the door was shut. "Not a chance," Connor replied. "That son of a bitch chews me out yesterday because when I let kids go to the bathroom, I don't have them sign out." "Well, rules are rules," Connor said, in an authoritarian voice, suppressing a chuckle. "Please, don't teach senior AP. I don't exactly have a lot of kids cutting class." "I hate you." "Hey, you're the one who volunteers to teach sophomores every year?" "Well, I guess I'm a glutton for punishment." The two sat in silence for a few more minutes, each sip of coffee making Connor more and more awake. He was getting up to grab himself a second cup when the door burst open yet again. "I am nailing that thing shut," Lance barked out. A small round face, crowned with curly blonde hair, poked its way inside. "Debbie Tomlin, ladies and gentlemen," Lance said with a nod. "Hi, Lance," Debbie replied with a smile, in a soft, mousy voice. Connor, I'm glad you're here. I think your protege is about to snap. Kristen? Yeah, I could hear her crying down the hall, and I just don't really know her, so... Always passing the buck, the Debbie Tomlin way, Lance said through a laugh. Will you shut up already? Connor shot back, while slinging a packet of Sweet and Low at him. All right, Connor said with a deep sigh, turning back to Debbie. I'll go check on her. Connor set down his mug and made his way out of the lounge. He headed for the main stairs and lumbered down them. Right as he came into the lower hallway, Connor was greeted with a plaque on the wall, with a picture of a student and some writing underneath. He avoided looking at it, though. He always avoided looking at it. He just kept going along at a half-jog, the entire time wondering what the hell the matter with him was, wondering why he ever agreed to be a mentor for a new teacher. It just created a number of headaches that he didn't need. Girl came to him every day with some inane question. He guessed that stipend they waved in his face was just too appealing. Connor passed the bathroom door where Jason would soon lay in wait. Right across the bathroom was Kristen's room, and down from both was the door leading out to the fields. Connor swung himself into Kristen's room, where he was greeted with the sight of a 23-year-old girl with a mop of brown hair hanging in front of her face, hiding the black-rimmed glasses underneath. She had a tight grip on her hair, as though she was getting ready to yank it out. A steady sound of sobbing came from within the whole mess. Kristen sat right across from the door at her desk, which couldn't even be seen underneath the tidal wave of papers that had hit it. What a far cry this image was from the girl he first met back in August. She would always come in cheery, grinning from ear to ear, always spouting off about the wonderful ideas she had for her classroom, talking about her dreams of inspiring students. "Hi, Mr. Sullivan," a choked voice said. "Connor," he corrected her. "What's going on, Kristen?" he asked with some hesitation, knowing that this would be a long day. "I can't do this." "What do you mean?" "There's too much." "You're putting too much on yourself. Let's see what we have here." Connor walked up to Kristen's desk and picked up a stack of half-sheets held together with a paper clip. "What's this?" Kristen finally peeked her head out from behind the brown curtain. "It's a warm-up that they did last week." Connor dropped it into the trash can that stood beneath him. "Well, that we can forget about. What else?" "But you don't need to grade everything. Give yourself a break." "But I said that it was going to be in the grade book." "Yeah, and most of them won't even remember. Tests, projects, most homework assignments, little crap like this gets recycled, okay?" "Okay." "And then there was my evaluation from last week. Dr. Leland didn't have anything nice to say to me." "That guy wouldn't have anything nice to say to a nun." "But just look at what he wrote," Kristen cried, waving a piece of paper in her face. Connor grabbed the paper and took a look at it, noticing a few notes on there about the learning objective not being posted clearly enough. There were 5 unstructured minutes at the end of class, some crap that Connor had been seeing for a while now. He laid the sheet down. "We'll go through all of it later today, okay? Just clear away what you can and then get ready for today. And I have to do the same. Sound good?" "I guess," she uttered with more than a hint of disappointment in her voice. "Hang in there, kid," Connor said, slapping her on the shoulder before heading out of the room and finally making his way to his own classroom that sat just a bit further down the hall. Right outside his door was a bench, currently occupied by a sleeping student with caramel skin and a slender build that Connor recognized. It was Terence Lipton. He'd had him last year in sophomore English. Nice enough kid. His mom was a cop, so he didn't dare to mess around at school. "Terry," Connor yelled, waking him up. Terry sprung up, as if out of a dream. He rubbed his eyes and ran his hands across his nearly bald scalp. "What?" he groaned. "Terry," Connor said again, in a much softer voice. This snapped the kid back to reality as he trained his gaze at the teacher ahead of him. "Hey, Mr. Sullivan," he said in the raspy voice of the recently woken. "What the hell are you doing here? Bell isn't for like another 45 minutes. My mom had to drop me off early today. That protest thing is happening on the east side of town." "Black Lives Matter protest?" Connor asked. A couple weeks ago, a black teenager had been shot by the police. Some small protests had been happening here and there, but the news had said this one would be significantly larger. Other groups from around the country were coming in this time. "Well, most of the force is down there today, and everyone is working overtime for it. Want to make sure things don't get out of hand." "Well, why are you sleeping outside my room?" Connor asked. "I like this bench. It's comfy." "Well, don't let me keep you, please. Get your beauty sleep." Terry gave a small smirk and collapsed down to the bench, back asleep before his head was on his makeshift pillow that appeared to be some torn-up hoodie. Connor unlocked his door, forced his way across the threshold into his room, and flipped on the lights. Right as he stepped inside, he heard a voice call from down the hall. "Lipton, wake the fuck up!" the voice cried out. Connor glanced back to see the source, Johnny Lemming, strutting down the halls. Connor rolled his eyes, wondering why Terry would spend any time with that kid. He'd never had him in class, but all the teachers knew of him. He'd get back from one suspension, and then promptly start another. Connor just shook his head and went into the classroom. One-piece tan-colored desks that no average-sized person should be able to fit into were arranged in a horseshoe pattern. All around the room were posters depicting famous books. Others gave your faux inspirational quotes, some bullshit about hard work and dreams. Connor never really understood putting them up. He couldn't think of a single instance where those posters made a significant difference for anyone. But he needed to fill up some black space on the walls, so up they went. Tucked in the corner across from the door was Connor's desk, practically bare, except for a couple pictures, paper tray, and jar of pens. Connor walked over to his desk and sank into his chair. Large, black, leather, and oh, so very comfortable. He loved this chair. Felt like he could fall asleep right here and now. Of course, that wasn't an option. There was work to be done. Beside the desk was his black computer bag. He'd left it behind last night, determined not to bring his work home with him. Connor fished the laptop out and started it up. He had to make sure his PowerPoint was ready to go. His class was reading The Chocolate War, and the lesson they were getting today was one that he always enjoyed teaching. The book told the story of an all-boys school crumbling into chaos after a student's refusal to sell chocolate. In the school was a not-so-secret society, the Vigils, which manipulated everything and punished any who got in their way. Leading it all was a kid named Archie. Getting kids to read nowadays was worse than pulling teeth, but this book usually caught their interest. Some even began searching out other books by the author. Today's lesson was about the nature of evil and whether any characters in the book qualified. It typically got some good discussions going. Connor was just pulling up a clip from a TV movie about the Nuremberg trials. In it, two people are having a discussion and end up defining evil as the absence of empathy. That definition always stuck with Connor. Next half hour was spent getting everything together, the only sound being the music coming from the iTunes open on his computer. This was his favorite time of day, usually being a time for him to relax, but that was hard to come by today. His mind kept drifting back to this morning with Brandy. He had been getting dressed, and she was sitting up in bed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?